Howdy howdy, Suitable here and welcome to an update video for our 400 and under gold infantry testing. Now, I recently went back and took a look at the first testing I did, which is about a year ago to start this project because I wanted to test all the infantry versus infantry and sort of get an idea of the ranking. And this first set of tests I only did against the Dwarf Warriors, and I had some results that were clearly understandable in the context of the testing that I did, but still looked a little wonky. So I wanted to update the testing, so I decided to add another set of tests in there against the Nasty Skulkers, particularly after the last test I did against 5 units for the 901 gold up. And I thought that was fairly reasonably accurate as to what your intuition would tell you. So I wanted to add that. Now, I'll go over how I do the testing and how I evaluate the data, and then what the data gave. I always say this is only one piece of the puzzle. It's a very myopic look at units versus units. It doesn't take into account faction effects or other qualitative measures of a unit's worth. It is just their combat effectiveness in a vacuum. And the way that I look at this is it is just a piece of information that you can use as you will, as you like. And the way that I use it is I just like understanding how units interact. So first of all, I'll show you how I do the testing. I set up the test against whatever the unit is. I always make my unit the defender, and I use unit testing fields and pick any general. These are two mods which are very, very good. They give you a very small area to test in so that the tests go very quickly, and you can actually execute them really fast in general compared to a regular map. I just take them off guard mode, start the battle, and I get them into that fight. So when they sort of contact, well, this is 59-54, I go and put down their actual start time when they hit each other, and then I let the battle go. And when it's done and the unit routes, I look at the end time. And this one's 59-34, but these ones are right around there. And I take the health of each unit, and those are the 4 pieces of data I take: the start time, end time, the health of each unit. And from that I get a DPS, or damage per second, from each unit done to the other. And then I look at the ratio of the ending hit points to the starting hit points versus the gold paid for the unit, and I subtract the two to get a gold differential. So in this case, the peasant mobs are winning gold from the Nasty Skulkers. They tend to be a pretty efficient unit if you let them go, because they're so cheap. And so then I do this test 5 times. I get an average, and that's sort of a rough understanding of that unit in terms of gold differential. Then I look at how fast they gain that gold, and really win-loss ratio and gold ratio, and I'm not really using in this set of testing. And you know, there's other statistics that I look at in different testing. This testing, there's just so many tests to do. I only do 5. Some of my other testing, I do 7 and up to 20. All right, so that gives you an idea of how I get the tests. Then when I have all the tests complete, I take the number. I take that number of how long the battle took, and I develop something called seconds per gold, meaning if I'm going to lose with the unit, I want that unit to last as long as possible. So I look at how many seconds did the unit last, how much gold did it cost, so how many seconds per gold spent did I get out of that unit in a loss. And then I look at the gold differential, the gold per minute. Now there are 2 time-based variables in there, but I find they give a more accurate evaluation of a unit because time is so important in an online battle, where often you'll pick a unit because it kills fast as opposed to as a good use of straight up gold, because you can catch an opponent off guard. So I looked at the Dwarf Warriors like that, and also the Nasty Skulkers, and did the same sort of analysis for both. And then I do rank order of each of the 6 elements, add them up, and just take which then I'll rank order them based on that addition. So we'll go over to the analysis now. Dark Elves, High Elves, and Wood Elves have no units in this. Now, compared to the very first test I did a year ago, just against the Dwarf Warriors for the 400 under, the average position changed by 3.1 spots. There are a few that are changed really big time, but we'll go over the units one by one, and I'll talk about them a little bit as we go through. I'm not going to do a real proper, top 10 video or anything. We'll go through all 31 units. I think it's 31. So we'll start with the skeleton spearmen for the vampires. Now, these are spearmen. They're anti-large. They are also undead, so they should show up near the bottom because they have lots of other advantages as being undead. And they shouldn't do that good in an infantry fight. So they finished one spot down from where they were last time, so not a whole lot. Next up is the Tomb King's Skeleton Spearmen, and they basically just swap spots. They're really, really close. They're both 350 gold, and they're the bottom two. Next up is the Zombie Pirate Deckhand Mobs with pole arms, and they finished at number 29. Really, they should probably finish at number 31, because they have anti-large and they also have armor piercing, but they're really, really close. They're not far off the bottom. So we'll keep on going. Now here's one where really it should not be down here, and that's the Beastman Ungor Herd at 400 gold. They finished way down at 28th place. They don't have shields, and they aren't anti-large. Really, in an infantry fight, they should be a long ways up. So I would say this is a unit that really should be targeted for a bit of improvement, some stat buffs, because they really don't belong down here. And when I say this, like I advocate often for stat buffs, even for units for other factions other than Dawi, because I want the game to be intuitive to new players. If they expect a unit to do a little better in an infantry fight, it should generally be that case where units are intuitive. Now, I know some units make themselves very intuitive, where they say they're a damage dealer or anti-infantry, but a basic unit like an Ungor Herd should be significantly higher than undead anti-large units. So that's sort of the first unit that I think really needs some sort of stat improvement, and probably in melee attack, I would imagine, would be the best. Because they'll do better, but they still won't last all that long. All right, coming in at number 27 is the Ungor Spearman Herd. And now here's a perfect example of something that's stratified incorrectly. The Ungor Herd should finish way above the Spearman Herd. The Spearman Herd have anti-large, and they shouldn't do better in terms of value in an infantry fight. Coming in at number 26 are the Dwarf Miners. Now, the Dwarf Miners went down 10 spots when we added in the Nasty Skulkers. And we know Dwarf Miners are a very poor unit in an infantry fight. They'll lose straight up to Men-at-Arms at 250 gold. I did a long evaluation of Miners and a bunch of testing to show their value is somewhere between 200 and 225 gold as opposed to 325, and talked about a lot about the improvements I'd like to see to Miners, particularly in their melee attack, and I'd like to see them be deployed, have their Vanguard deployment be able to deploy underground in a hidden fashion. But there's, they're a poor unit in a straight up fight. Now, they do have some decent anti-large capabilities, because large chariots and cav do tend to be armored and do tend to have pretty low melee defense, and they can get in the way. They are sort of the dwarfs' only real, we'll call it quote-unquote chaff unit, because dwarfs, high elves, dark elves don't really have chaff units per se, but I guess Miners would be that. All right. So they showed up much more where they should. Before the when I just tested against the Dwarf Warriors, the Miners actually showed up higher than the Miners with blasting charges, which I knew was wrong, and I did say so at the time. But now that I've added the Nasty Skulkers into the test, this is stratified quite nicely. All right, coming in at number 25 is the Bretonnia Spearmen-at-Arms with shields. And Bretonian infantry stratifies perfectly. I love how they look. They really, you'll see how the rest of it goes, but this didn't change from the first test. The first test they stratified perfectly. The second test they stratified perfectly. Mind you, the Spearmen-at-Arms went down 6 spots, which is a little bit more correct. They are anti-large, and they do have shields, so you do have to pay for that in infantry fight capability. Coming in at number 24. are the Tomb King Skeleton Warriors. Now, these are an undead unit. Undead units, even though they're more of an infantry and not anti-large, should end up showing up in the bottom half because undead units can be healed. They cause fear. They don't rout, even though they crumble. Like, there's a lot of good things about undead units that can't be accounted for in this testing because I stopped the test right when the undead units go to negative leadership, so that I get a sort of feel for where they show up. So they should show up in the bottom half of this testing, understanding how the testing is done and how the units do operate. So Tomb King Skeleton Warriors went down 1. Next is the Vampires Skeleton Warriors. Now the Tomb King Skeleton Warriors are 325. The Vampire Skeleton Warriors are 300 gold. A little bit different in price. The Vampire Skeleton Warriors went up 3 spots from that from the testing. It's not a big change, but it's a little closer to where they should be, I suppose. Coming in at number 22 are the Ungor Spearmen Herd with shields. And again, this is where I talk about reverse stratification, and this is not how it should be for the Beastmen. Ungor Spearmen Herd with shields should be below Ungor Spearmen Herd on this list, because they not only are they anti-large, they also have a shield, so they should have to pay for that in terms of their melee capability in infantry fight. That's my supposition anyways. And you see that these are exactly backwards, where the Ungor Herd, the non-anti-large, non-shielded unit, is the lowest, and then you have the Spearmen, the anti-large unit, higher, and the Spearmen unit with the shield even higher. So they're exactly backwards, and it didn't change. It stayed exactly where it was, 22 on the list from the first set of tests. Coming in at number 21 are the Skink Cohorts. Again, they did not change at all from the first test. Their Skink Cohorts are actually not that great of a unit in a straight-up fight. Where they really excel is they are cheap. They are the cheapest unit for the Lizardmen, and they're fast, and they, of course, can muck up ranged units, and they can kill artillery pretty easily. And if you get them in water, they're really strong. Like, I've done some testing of Skink Cohorts in water. I don't know if I've did any online or on videos, but Skink Cohorts in water against a unit that is weak in water, they transform into a powerhouse. I think they probably we're gonna call it a 40% stat swing. It's crazy how much better they are in the water against a unit that's not good in the water with that aquatic trait. But hard to say if they should be here. They should probably be a little bit higher, I would think, because there are still some undead units above the Skink cohorts, and there's still some anti-large units above the Skink cohorts. But you can argue that the other utility they gain sort of does improve them a little bit, but I think their stats should be a little bit better, personally. All right, coming in at number 20, Clanrat Spears with Shields. I think this is a good example. The Skink cohorts should be in terms of a value proposition in an infantry fight, I think they should be above Clanrat Spears with Shields. But Skaven are another set of infantry that stratifies beautifully. They do, in general, they do a pretty good job of where they are. Now, the Skaven with Clanrat Spears did go up 5 positions, but they're still the lowest Skaven, and they should be. They're the anti-large with the shield. They come in at number 20. Coming in at number 19 are the Norscan Marauders, and they went down actually 5. Now, I think they do have shields, but they don't. They're just called Marauders. They're not called Marauders with shields because I don't think there's no basic Marauders that don't have shields. There are armor-piercing Marauders. So now they came in number 19. Now they are really a pretty weak unit in that they don't have a lot of armor. And they don't have any armor piercing. They probably should be a little bit higher, same with the Skink cohorts, but they did show up pretty low. They're, in general, a pretty weak unit. Now, even though we'll see Chaos has amazing infantry, I think they should be a little bit better, but that's Norska. Anyways, coming in at number 18 are the basic zombie pirate deckhand mobs. And boy, when they put them up against those nasty skulkers who don't have a lot of armor, they just rocketed up this list, up 9 spots from 27 to 18. So they're a pretty efficient unit for an undead unit, really, in terms of most matchups. Now, against armored things, they really get weak really fast, but just against trash, they hold for a long time, and they actually dish out a little damage in return. They're a pretty efficient unit at 300 gold in the right situation. Coming in at number 17 are the Spearmen at Arms for Bretonnia. And here again, where I talk about stratification, the Bretonnian Spearmen at Arms with shields is number 25, and the Spearmen at Arms with no shields is number 17, and they should be in an infantry fight. This makes logical sense. Coming in at number 16 are these zombies. Now, they come up 4 spots, and 16 out of 31 is about halfway, and that is about the right cost. I remember I did a video saying they should be costed at about 75 gold, and even 50 gold wouldn't be too bad. 75 gold wouldn't be awful because they're so terrible in so many other ways, but showing up at 16, you know, they went up quite a bit because Nasty Skulkers don't have a whole lot of armor. I think that is pretty reasonable. I still think there's a case to be made that they should be worth 75 gold, just because they are the slowest unit on the field at all times at 23, and everything can kill them. And you know, now that summons have been toned down, you know, these should be an automatic pick in every vampire army. And putting them down to 75, I mean, you may not think that's lots, but it would bring them up this list. Now at 100, they're pretty close to where they belong. I think 75 gold. I think just this, my game balance and logic don't often match up, but peasants should be more expensive than zombies, because zombies are dead or undead. Really, the zombies should be the cheapest unit in the game, is what I'm saying, is what I believe. All right, so coming in at number 15 are the Empire Spearmen. And they should be down here, but we should see the Empire Spearmen with shields below the Empire Spearmen. And again, another case of incorrect stratification for the Empire. Coming in at number 14 are the Clanrat Spears. And Clanrats, just Skaven in general, have a lot of efficient units down here, same with Bretonnia. But Clanrat Spears at 14, they're decent enough in an infantry fight. And of course, they have that anti-large and the charge defense against large. Coming in at number 13 are the Empire Swordsmen. Now they came down 5 spots fighting against the Nasty Skulkers. This is where I would say the Empire Swordsmen need a buff, and the Empire Spearmen maybe should be right about where they are, but the Empire Spearmen with shields should be down here, sort of in this 17, 18, 19, 20 area, so the Empire Swordsmen would make sense to be an anti. I know they're not an anti-infantry unit, but to do the best in an infantry fight, and they don't. And this is one of the areas where I talk about stratification being incorrect. And Empire Swordsmen could use a buff. Now, they have 32 melee attack and 32 melee defense. Their stats are not too bad. Where would that buff come in? I don't know. Maybe some armor, maybe make them a little bit more rugged. Maybe some leadership. Armor and leadership, something like that, would make a little more sense. But anyways, coming in at number 12 are the Chaos Marauders. They're coming in quite a bit higher than the Norseman Marauders. They went down 2 spots. The Norseman Marauders went down 5. They are 25 gold cheaper, and that does make a difference in this sort of testing and rank order style of what we do. That faction ability for the Norskins, where they go through their rage mechanic, isn't as big a thing as you might think, because often they don't get to the 3rd level of their rage mechanic. I think they need units that have some defensive capabilities to actually get there, so it's not as strong a faction effect as you might think. Alright, moving on to number 11 are the Spearmen with shields, and this is exactly Empire Spearmen with shields at number 11. Really, if they should flip, but they shouldn't be so tightly packed. Really, the Empire have 3 units and 5 picks. They should be a little bit more what I call stratified. I mean separated correctly, where the swordsmen are at the top, then the spearmen with the shields. So now we're getting into the top 10. Coming in at number 10 are the Bretonnian men-at-arms with shields. Again, they're not an anti-large. They do have a shield, and they went up 3 spots, 325 gold. They're a reasonable unit for that price spot, and they kick the crap out of miners. I know I've done a lot of testing like that, and they do have those shields. They are terrible leadership, and there's lots of reasons to call them bad. But in this type of testing, which again is in a vacuum, and it only shows sort of one thing, they're just straight up ability to fight 2 types of units, and evaluated from there, they're not too bad. And they show up at number 10, and I think they kind of sort of deserve to be there in that 400 gold and under range. Men-at-arms with shields. Coming in at number 9, just the basic goblin from the Greenskins. And they never moved at all. They were number 9 just against the Dwarf Warriors, and when you add in the Nasty Skulkers, they stayed at number 9. So they're just, the Greenskin Goblins are just a decent all-arounder. You do see them in lots of matchups because they are true chaff. They're expendable. They have silver shields, and there are a lot of models. With the Wa, they can do some damage. They can take charges. I mean, they're just like a classic kind of middling chaff unit, and they have the good traits like expendable to go with it, and they have that nice silver shield. All right, coming in at number 8 are the Night Goblins. Now they went up 3 spots, and Night Goblins are actually a pretty decent little unit. They do have poison. They're not as strong as the Night Goblin Fanatics, who can throw those spinners out. I mean, those Night Goblin Fanatics are a really, really strong unit, but they are intense. They're very micro-intensive, and to get all 3 of their uses of those spinning goblins would be quite difficult, but very powerful. Now, the Night Goblins are just a strong unit, cause poison, and definitely have their uses at 400 gold. So coming in at, and really, this is like all Greenskin infantry is good. There is no bad Greenskin infantry. They don't have a dud in the bunch. All Greenskin infantry is good. All right, coming in at number 7 is the Bretonnian Men-at-Arms. So you see the Men-at-Arms to 250 gold. At number 7, Men-at-Arms is shield. Number 10, so they're stratifying correctly. And the Bretonnian Men-at-Arms, 250 gold, are reasonable. They can, 250 gold, if you can get them around, they can take out artillery. They can do very well against most backline range, like archers and bowmen and quarrelers and stuff like that, and hold them down for quite some time. They're a good little unit. Obviously, they have terrible leadership. I mean, there are only 250 gold. Coming in at number 6 are the Dwarf Miners with blasting charges, and they moved up 12 spots. And this is more where they should be. Like, we talked about this in the first set of testing and said, well, we know we tested against just Dwarf Warriors, so they should be higher. And now that I added in the Nasty Skulkers, the miners with blasting charges rocketed up this list, and the regular miners rocketed down the list. Now these are separated sort of as they are. And in the testing we did, blasting charges all by themselves are worth about 200 gold, and kind of in that range. And you see this now when we add in that second unit for testing. This is stratified a lot. It looks a lot more correct to my eyes, and sort of passes the smell test now for me. So now we're getting into the top 5, and the top 5 I don't think changed a whole lot. So coming in at number 5 are Skaven Slave Spears. They went up 1 spot, and they do have anti-large. They don't have charge defense against large, but they only cost 150. So they have the anti-large trait of like +6. I think it's 6 stats, something like that. And they're really, really inexpensive, and they are efficient in an infantry fight if they're allowed to do that. And they can do all kinds of things. Again, they can take out artillery, and they can muck up things, and they can take a charge, and they're really cheap chaff infantry. Coming in at number 4 are the Clan Rats with shields. Now, These clan rats with shields are, again, they went up 3 spots, another nice efficient unit, and they do have the shields. Now, they're really should probably be down a touch more, but, you know, Skaven really reliant on their chaff and cheap infantry for filling out, and now even more so with a lot of their interesting units like their Jezzails and their rattling gunners and doom flares. Like the Skaven look like they should on most of their builds now. You're seeing mostly 20 stack builds where they're filled out with clan rats and slaves, and they have all these big powerful units that are in there. And I think Skaven seem to be in a pretty nice spot, and part of it is because they have really strong low tier infantry in terms of value for gold. All right, coming in at number 3, the peasant mob. Now they went down 1 spot, and again, they're a nice efficient unit in terms of the value they can pull. A peasant mob at 100 gold can beat up a cannon crew. You know, they can get the job done. And I really, this is the term, a peasant mob gets all of its value if it gets in the way. It stops one charge against any other unit in the entire game pretty much, but any other unit on the Bretonnian roster except another peasant mob. So they stop one charge, they muck up one unit, they take, you know, like 6 volleys from archers. They've paid for themselves, right? I mean, they're so inexpensive. They're very, very efficient. All right, coming in at number 2 are the basic clan rats, and I've talked about how efficient these units are for a long, long time. They are a really solid all-around unit. They went up 1 spot, and you know, even though the clan rats with shields are kind of at 4, they've moved up a little bit. The basic clan rats, like, I have a hard time in my mind thinking that giving a clan rat a shield would be worth it at 300 gold for 50 gold. You know, because you're really, basic clan rats are so good. They can absolutely demolish artillery. They really can hold their own and beat a lot of back row range like peasant archers and rangers and stuff like that. They're just a solid all-around efficient unit, and they moved up 1 spot. Coming in at number 1, the exact same unit, the Skaven Slave. They didn't move. We tested them against the Dwarf Warriors, and then we added the testing in against the Nasty Skulkers, and they stayed at number 1. Skaven Slaves are just the most efficient unit at 400 gold and under. They just have a great combination of stats and speed and capability. And yeah, their leadership is really terrible, but you're not taking a whole lot of risk by having 4 Skaven Slaves on your roster. If one gets through, it's like that 4 Skaven Slaves is what's going to cost you 500 total gold. If one gets through and beats down a piece of artillery or holds up a charge, or that was going to be against something big, or stops something from getting to one of your main units, or holds up anything even for a second, they paid for themselves. But even in an infantry fight, they are efficient. They pulled positive value off the Nasty Skulkers. Like, where is this? So they pulled, if I go over here, like they pulled 29 gold off the Nasty Skulkers. That's a really, really strong performance. That meaning to say, if you matched up Nasty Skulkers and Skaven Slaves in a sort of a gold for gold battle where they couldn't get surrounds and fight from the side, the Skaven Slaves would be more efficient and would win that if you had enough Skaven Slaves. Now, if you get the beauty of having cheap units like this is they can be in, like, an expensive unit. The one thing it can't do is be in 2 places at once. Skaven Slaves, you can get 2 Skaven Slaves, you put one in front and you get one with a rear charge, and now they really can do a lot more than even 1 men-at-arms from Bretonnia at 250, and they're the same price. They can beat a lot of units like that. And even if they don't beat them, giving them that attack in the rear, attack in the side, they have a lot of utility on top of their straight up combat capabilities, which is not too bad. And it's hard to when you're fighting Skaven, it is hard to force yourself to click on Skaven slaves because they are so cheap, and you don't want to waste your time going after them, but you kind of have to when you get to near the when you get at some point, you just don't want them getting in on the wrong units. Like a set of Skaven slaves mucking up Thunderers or Quarterers is a disaster, right? That's exactly what you don't want. A set of Skaven slaves getting in the way of Slayers or anything is exactly what you don't want. So they're a great unit at 400 gold and under. They didn't move from their top spot, and they're still in the top spot by a good long ways. So, I mean, I think you could add 2 more units for testing in here of a different type, and the Skaven Slaves are still going to be right up there because they are such an efficient unit. So, anyways, that is the testing, and that is the data, and that's the new order, which I think is a little more sensible. Obviously, stratifying the miners much more correctly. This is how the miners should be. Really, miners with blasting charges are a pretty solid unit if they get their blasting charges off, and just basic miners are terrible in an infantry fight, but they obviously have other uses. Now, really, that's the update for the video. I am going to do an update for the 401 to 600 gold. I want to add in an anti-infantry armor piercing to really bring that out, and then I think they'll be done updating the infantry testing. I think that would make me sort of happy with where things belong, because some of the units in the 401 gold to 600 gold really don't pass the smell test because I only tested against 2 things, but they're not terrible. Now I think this, for the most part, will say passes the smell test, and you know, I think adding in units from here will change the order a little bit, but it'll be less and less obviously every time. I tested against 5 units in the 901 gold piece, and obviously every new test changes everything a lot less. So there's some sort of point of diminishing returns. I think this was a very good unit to add into this testing, and it gave good results that I expected to see based on intuition, which is not always good. Sometimes the reason you test is it goes against your intuition, but I think testing was good. So anyways, I'd love to hear comments down below, and your thoughts on the changes on particularly dwarfs, the miners, blasting charges, the miners, and maybe your thoughts on skink cohorts. Really, they haven't moved. I think they should be a little stronger, and also the beastmen, Ungor herd, and miners are really, I think they should be a lot stronger in terms of their stat layout. So anyways, I would love to hear from you in the comments, and with that said, I will see you soon.